place you can get a trusted source of information to build upon. That would be the basis of your decision-making ability to say, I'm going to perform full-blown assessments of these apps based on their risk. How do you profile that if you don't have an inventory? Exactly. And asset management is one of the things that large organizations do the worst. And they don't know where the machines are. They're in some storage area somewhere. Someone, things get lost, mishandled,
even with applications, right? So you don't know exactly where all the applications are, depending on the size of the.
In one employer I had, we virtualized a lot of stuff. We didn't know where the applications were, what boxes were hosting what applications anymore. We sort of lost the ability to determine, and it was really kind of ridiculous in a way. And so I struggle with the CIO to just say, look, you want me to protect you? You tell me what to protect first. Like, where's the list? Give me a list of systems, something. And it was sure, and then after you go through the exercise, as I was mentioning before, you have remediation, which is a big challenge because it's who owns that remediation. You hand the laundry list of vulnerabilities to the application developers, and they're like, well, I'm working on new features to roll out. Right. So how do I do this? Yeah, they don't care about this. The stuff you're bringing up is old hat. I mean, they don't. It's old news. They don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, and that's a talk in itself. I mean, there's the guys at DTCC really did a great job, and they gave a presentation at one of the local Owasp meetings here about how they deal with that, how they deal with the remediation of issues on a large scale like that, and it's important to kind of figure that out and sort it out. But I think Jeff had something he wanted to add as well.
About the mortgage thing.
Yeah, well, I think the conversation sort of went past that. But I really think the point that you're talking about just there, about application portfolio management, inventory management, is absolutely critically important. So, and I think it's interesting in this crisis, you're going to have merging entities and acquisitions, and when you do that, you've got a huge problem now combining the portfolios and then normalizing the risk ratings across that whole portfolio.
And I see some of my old colleagues in the back, and we've been through these exercises over and over again, both acquiring and dissolving, and in the banking world for the last couple of years, it's been basically mergers and now bankruptcies. And so, yeah, I mean, that's when you really suffer the consequences. I mean, we suffer it every day. Risk and security guys, we need this information to do our jobs. We can't get it, but they're just like, you know what, tough. We don't have it. Do what you can, or don't do it. We don't care. But now, when it comes to time to integrate and incorporate or merge, then they absolutely need it, and then they're looking to get it anywhere. So now, what happens then is, what I've seen happen is, application security people become sort of leaders in the integration efforts because they have information that no one else has, because they've done the work and tried to maintain inventories of systems. So I've seen security people become sort of integration program leaders, and it's like, well, what is the common aspect? And is that they have information that they have the ability to actually provide data that no one else can.
So the similarity that I see between the sort of financial meltdown and the application security situation that we're in is, at their core, they both have to do with bad risk understanding, bad estimation of risk, right?
Really good way
so I'd like to get your thoughts on, well, which is more crazy, giving loans to people who can't pay back the money, or the kinds of risks that we're taking with our applications, like deploying critical financial applications with no input validation? And where's the breakdown? Like, something's going haywire in our financial organizations, and I'm trying to get a handle on it.
So it's a very good analogy, actually, and I'm glad you. It would take someone of your experience to actually come up with an analogy, because I wouldn't have been able to. But I think the analogy is absolutely right. You're talking about unquantified risks. In one case, you're talking about risks that are, whether there was models to measure the risk of these mortgages, there were models that they have, but the models don't work in this case because the debt is being passed around so much and packaged and repackaged that they lose sight of the actual underlying instrument, right? And in what we're talking about here, what's that? It's not fraud. It's not fraud. It's legal. So that's the problem. It's completely not fraud. If it were fraud, we'd be in a better situation, because then we could say, that what they did was illegal. But what they did was legal. It's just so there's so many people involved in a transaction that in the end, no one's holding the liability. That's the problem.
They lost a handle on the risk, right? It got packaged up in some way. And it's exactly the same thing that happens with code, right? You get some code and it gets all packaged up into some application, and you lose the handle on the risk, and what's really important.
And when you try to unravel that afterwards, you try to unravel the problem that you've created within your production environment, how difficult is it really to attempt to if you got a multi-tier application, distributed application, imagine trying to unravel now the problem you've created with all this layering. It's layering. It's the same exact word even. You really would have to reverse engineer your entire environment to figure out what exactly, and that could be a monumental effort depending on what you're talking about in terms of the application. So it's a very, in some cases, very similar. It's all about responsibility in the end, right? Ownership and responsibility. Someone has to be responsible for doing the right thing. In this case, the business people that want to innovate, want to add value, want to, roll out new and cool applications, they have to be held responsible for any additional, say, side effects to their applications and be accountable to those things. I mean, that's really where the responsibility has to be with the business. When we try to remove it and say, personally, like you're the IT security guy, you're a separate group within IT, you're responsible for securing applications. I'm not responsible. I'm responsible for trying to instill the best practice and trying to motivate and incentivize people to do the right thing. But in the end, I'm not going to win a battle, as Jim Roth said. Vanessa so he said you need to wear a Kevlar vest when you go to the business and tell them they're not going to roll out their application, because you're not going to win that fight. You're going to have the shortest CISO tenure of anybody in the history of CISOs, which if you look at the CISOs in the banks, they last like, average I think is 6 months. So they come and go quicker than,
So I wanted to follow up on that. So it seems to me like there's the businesses are making bad risk decisions, and I got to put the blame on some kind of visibility problem, right? Like, and I think that's where we have to take the responsibility in our, the people in this room. When we find a risk, we've got to explain it to the business people so that they can make a smart decision, because right now they're making insane decisions about application security risks.
And you said to me earlier you think the problem's getting worse. It's not getting any better. I think that you're right. My concern is, where's the incentive to the developer? What's the incentive for the developer to find security flaws, whatever you want to call it, errors in the code? I mean, if they can say it works, it does what you want it to do. It just does it in a really bad way. Like, it does it in a terribly insecure way, but you don't need to know that right now, because all you care about is when you enter your transaction, it gets processed and you get the results that you want. You get your confirmation, right?
Well, sure. I mean, from the same perspective, I think when I take a look at the companies that we do business with, being financial institutions, and I look at where they are from a security perspective today and compare that to where they were 3, 4, 5 years ago, I think there's been an improvement. There's been a good improvement.
I guess my concern is that at the core of these banks, there's still a lot of legacy systems that really are not being necessarily reviewed, and they're still they're being redeployed, and in some cases, they may change the platform, they virtualize, but it's still the same old legacy.
And then you end up with things like the rogue trader incident, for example.
So, and that's a perfect example. Role-based access control, which everyone's sort of bored to death of that now because it's been talked about so much. Still, and Cuthbert mentioned in his discussion, implementing good roles and role-based access control is still a major problem. I mean, and if you think it's a major problem in new applications, what about all those old ones that you're still relying on to conduct most of your transactions? At the end of the day, you're still going to touch those legacy systems that those large banks deployed 20 years ago with no role-based access control, and then you're dealing with one guy who has, middle office or back office access, who can basically bypass your entire set of controls just by going into a system that was never designed to do the kind of, or implement the kind of